Today we are returning to our study of the book of Genesis. I interrupted this study last week as it was the time that we remember the crucifixion and celebrate the resurrection of our Lord, to do a study of Psalm 22 because it prophesies all those things that happened on the cross. I do want to clear up a possible matter of confusion. I am a worm. That worm, I explained, is a grub-like insect, and it is used as a source of red dye. And I explained about that in that lecture, but I told you that the genus name of that insect is Coccus. And I mentioned that Coccus is also a genus for bacteria, and that would be a spiral-shaped bacteria such as Streptococcus. I did not want you to mistakenly think that the worm of Psalm 22 is a bacterium. It is an insect. That said, I will review a bit of the chapters leading up to Genesis 29, which we will take up today. In the prior chapters, Esau gives away his birthright to Jacob and is part of a connivery by their mother Rebekah. At just before 29, Jacob is on his way to Syria, to his mother's homeland, to, in fact, her brother's Laban's home to seek a wife. He is traveling in the chapter preceding 29, and that is when he is on the Gaza Strip, and he has this dream about a ladder, and his head is resting on a stone. And that stone, he built an altar there, but that stone became a very important part of the people's history, and it was carried about with them. As a matter of fact, that stone left with Zedekiah's daughters when Jeremiah, the Bible says, took them to Egypt, which indeed he did. Historically, we know that he took them into Western Europe. One of those daughters was named Skoda, hence the name of the country Scotland. That stone was with her, and it was called the Stone of Scone. It was taken by the English government, and for a long, long time, that stone was underneath the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey. As a matter of fact, our England's reigning monarch, Elizabeth II, sat over that stone when she took the reign. And that stone, in very recent times, has been returned to the country of Scotland. That being said, we'll take up today with chapter 29 and Jacob's travel into Syria to seek a wife. Chapter 29, verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east, modern-day Syria. 2. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. Far out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. Now we wonder if that is that same well that Isaac, his father, came upon when he saw Rebekah, and his servant, Isaac's servant, brother Eleazar, had all those camels, and Rebekah drew all the water and watered those camels. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. 4. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. 5, and he said unto them, Know ye Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. 6, and he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with sheep. Now Rachel means you, and it also means fair. And those of you women may have bought a makeup or a foundation or a powder called Rachel, and that's what that means, fair. 7, and he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. 8, and they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, till they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep. 9, and while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. 10, and it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Repeated there, mother's brother, that we know that Rachel was his cousin. 11, and Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept, so glad to see these countrymen of his. 12, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father. 13, and it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house, and he told Laban all these things. Now, he might have been remembering when Isaac sent up the servant with all those camels loaded down with many costly goods and things as gifts to Nahor for the hand of Rebekah. Perhaps he expected some of the same kind of remuneration. 14, and Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and flesh, and he abode with him the space of a month. 15, and Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? 16, and Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and her name means weak-eyed. And the name of the younger was Rachel, which means you are fair, pale. 17, Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. 18, and Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. 7, the biblical numerical number of completeness. 19, and Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than I should give her to another man. Abide with me. 20, and Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had for her. 21, and Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. 22, and Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast, a marriage feast. 23, and it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her unto him, unto Jacob, and he went in to her. 24, Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for a handmaid. 25. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did I not serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? 26. And Laban said, I must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. 27. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet another 7 years. 28. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. But Jacob still has to work the 7 years. And Laban gave Rachel to his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. And Bilhah means bashful. 30. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet another 7 years. 31. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. Now that word hated in the Hebrew is sane, S-A-N-E, and it does not mean pure form of hatred. It is better translated loved less. 32. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben, the very eldest of the 12 tribes. And Reuben means see, a son. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. But he won't. He won't ever love her as much as he loved Rachel. 33. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon, meaning hearing. The Lord has heard me. No daughters, sons. Important to that people of that region. 34. And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. Now Levi is the tribe from which came the priests. And in Mary's genealogy recorded in Luke, we know that on her mother's side, since she was a cousin of Elizabeth, and Elizabeth had to be a full-blood Levite to have married Zechariah, we know that Mary was on one side of her family a Levite, the priest line. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. And Judah is the king line. And in Luke, the genealogy of Mary, giving her father's line of ancestry, traces him to David and back to Judah. And through his mother Mary, Jesus came from both the priest line and the king line. And in Matthew, he gives genealogy of Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, and Joseph also was a descendant of Judah, or the king line. Chapter 30. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Jacob envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. 2. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of thy womb? He said, me instead of God. In other words, he's saying, if you want a child, the proper person to ask is God. 3. And she said, behold, my maid Bilhah, go into her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. Now, we've heard that song and dance once before. When Sarah insisted that Abraham go to her handmaiden Hagar and produced Ishmael and created trouble that has come down through the history into today. 5. And Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. 6. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan, and Dan means I'm judge. And as we move through the Old Testament and get into the allotment of lands in the Promised Land, we will see that Dan got his share. He was treated as one of the 12. And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. Notice that they're coming in pairs. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, and that means wrestling. And he also is one of the 12 patriarchs of Israel. 9. When Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah her maid and gave Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, a troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. And Gad means troop. And Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. Once again, we're working in pairs. And Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher, which means happy. 14. And Reuben, that's the oldest child now of Leah, went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field. Now, mandrakes are a tuber. They are mentioned throughout literature as having some kind of magical power. And in this time, in that region of the world, they were supposedly instrumental in causing fertility on the part of a woman. And brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said, 15, and she said unto her, it is a small matter that thou hast taken my husband, Leah speaking to Rachel. And wouldst thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrakes. That's a bargain. She said, well, you can have Jacob tonight, but I get some of the mandrakes. 16. And Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night, bought and paid for. 17. And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the 5th son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden unto my husband. And she called his name Issachar, my hire. So now we've had 2 by Rachel's handmaid, 2 by Leah's handmaid, 2 more that are Leah's, and the 4 that Leah has already produced. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun, which means dwelling, another of the 12 patriarchs. 21. And afterward she bare a daughter, and called her name Dinah. And Dinah means vindication. 7 children now. 22. And God remembered Rachel. Rachel must have figured it out and prayed. And God hearkened to her and opened her womb. 23. And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. 24. And she called his name Joseph, which means adding, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. And of course, as we learn moving through these early chapters of the Old Testament, that Joseph was Jacob's favorite. 25. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto my own place and to my own country. 26. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. 27. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry. For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. He has been greatly blessed by the presence of Jacob, and he wishes to keep him there. 28. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. 30. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude, and the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. And now, when shall I provide for mine own house also? Laban has become quite wealthy from nothing with Jacob's presence there. 31. And he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. 32. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and the spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. I'll take all that's speckled and all that's brown and spotted. Thing is, in Syria in that time, it's documented that almost all sheep were white and almost all goats were black. Having a speckled, a spotted, or a brown would have been rather rare. 33. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before my face. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. 33. And Laban said, behold, it might be according to thy word. 35. And he removed that day he-goats that were ring-streaked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them unto the hand of his sons, so they could not mix up. Nasty thing here that Laban did. 36. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. 37. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and peeled white streaks in them, and made the white appear which was in the rod. He peeled them back and then sharpened them. 38. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters in the watering troughs, when the flocks should come to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. In other words, he built himself a little fence and a chute to separate as they came to drink water. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-streaked, speckled, and spotted. 40. And Jacob did separate the lambs, and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-streaked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves, and put them not into Jacob's cattle. He did three things now. He has made the rods, made the fence, he separated them out, and 41, and it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. He's using selective breeding. Now, there's an expert, and I can't pull his name, but he has a commentary on Genesis and done a great deal of study of the time and customs, and supposedly they could, as we might call marking a child in today's world, which isn't true, can't happen. But it was thought that if at the watering places, if the ewes saw white, that they would produce white lambs, whatever. But actually, Jacob has been very keen-minded in outwitting Laban. He's made himself a fence and a chute. He's separated. He has done selective breeding. He has selected the strongest of the herds to breed. 42. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. He selected the weak to bear sheep and goats for Laban, and he selected strong animals to bear his son. 43. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and asses. And that's the end of chapter 30. And as you can see, unlike Isaac's servant before him, who came loaded down with precious goods and costly things to buy the hand of Rebekah, Jacob essentially came empty-handed. But with God's blessing, he left quite rich, with speckled and spotted and brown goats and sheep, which were not a common thing. Thank you for listening to this lesson, and when we next study, we will get into chapter 31. Thank you very much.